Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome to episode 289 of the Sample Chapter Podcast. And this week we welcome back last week's guest, Peter Germany, all the way from Gravesend, UK. Peter joined us last week, and we had a great interview. It was really good getting to finally meet someone I'd known for years. You know, that's one of the good things about the internet. And I think we could all use some good news from time to time, you know, and it's neat to be able to make these connections through podcasting, through writing groups and stuff like that. So that's how Peter and I in a roundabout way, met many years ago, which was through the Mondo Method podcast, hosted by Armand Rosamilia and Chuck Buda. Again, longtime friends of this show. And Peter and I were aware of each other, you know, kind of, liked each other's stuff here and there, you know, that kind of thing. And until last week, that was the first time we ever got to speak and kind of get to know each other. And it was a great time. Peter is the author of short stories in 8 anthologies, and now has 2 novels, one of which you're going to hear from today. And it's a great reading. It's riveting. It's interesting, and it really sets the tone, I think, for what this book is all about. His debut of a series called Penal Earth. You're going to hear about that in a moment. But last week, going back to that interview again, it was a lot of fun. We got to talk about how he wrote a lot of like horror and a mix of some sci-fi, you know, different stuff like that. His influences, taking his story ideas and turning them into short stories, which is a great practice that I never used to understand myself until I started trying it out. You know, it's amazing how many times what I've found to be very helpful, and Peter and I got to talk a little bit about this, is this as many authors, we have that drawer full of story ideas that we think is a novel, but what if it's not? What if that idea that's in your head for a novel is actually just a short story? It's a way to get words on page, something to keep going, and I have found that to be extremely useful in my own writing, doing things like that to be able to put out more work. And it's something I'm working on myself right now. Anyway, but back to Peter. Knowing the end of a story versus not knowing and exploring, getting the reader to feel something in what you've written. And then we had a good time discussing some movies that scared us, all before we got to another all new "Would you rather" question at the end, and that was fun getting to discuss that with Peter as well. It's a great interview. It was a lot of fun. I think you're going to really enjoy that. And there's a link in the bottom down in the show notes to last week's episode, so I invite you to go check that out. Of course, the show is available everywhere podcasts are available, including the player that has really surprised me in recent years, how much that has come along, which is YouTube. Now, this is not a video podcast at all. We're still just audio only, but it's kind of amazing how much YouTube has risen up, even without a video. It just plays in the background. And you know, I got to admit, I actually go to YouTube an awful lot myself and just have music or ambiance and stuff like that playing in the background. One of these days, remind me to tell you one of the things I like to listen. Some studies I've done, and yeah, I'll share with you what I like to listen to in the background, especially when I'm exploring my reading or my writing. I'll tell you about that in a future episode. As for me, yeah, my own writing, it's been slower than I really like lately. I've had a lot going on in my personal life of late. More a lot more trips out of town than I anticipated. You know, some family health issues and stuff like that. So that's called for some quick trips out of town, and you know, something that was, you know, a quick trip turned into a weekend here and there. But you know, it's all's well. I mean, as well as it can be, and I'm trying not to let that bring me down. Trying not to let that interfere too much. Still getting some interviews done here and there when I can, with new ones coming here very soon. Actually, right now the plan is to try and make sure I'm getting you an episode every week, so we hit episode 300 by the end of this year. Which, oh my gosh, that's incredible! I can't believe I'm that close to 300. Uh, Thank you everybody for following the show for so long. as you have, and for helping this little show reach such a milestone. But we're not there yet. It's coming soon. Right now, this is only 289, so we'll get there soon, though. Anyway, I'm rambling. How about we go ahead and hop on over to that sample reading from Peter Germany and Penal Earth, Book 1.
Penal Earth, Book 1, by Peter Germany, Chapter 3. Dark clouds were rolling towards them from down the grass plains. They looked mean, and the torrential downpours clear to see. Aside from the forest, which was a long way in the other direction, there was only this solitary house that offered shelter. Dizzy and Georgie had carried Duncan on a hatch that had come off Dizzy's pod. Duncan didn't come close to fitting on it, so they'd had to all but curl him into a ball to keep his limbs from dangling off. They had carried him almost non-stop like this, and Dizzy's arms were burning. Jimmy had offered a few times to take over, but Dizzy and Georgia both said they had momentum, and to be fair to Jimmy, he wouldn't be able to carry Duncan's dead weight so far. When they were 100 metres away from the single, solitary, dirty white house, they put Duncan down. "Did you want to stay here and keep an eye on Duncan while Jimmy and I go and check it out?" Dizzy asked. He couldn't help but notice how nervous this made Jimmy. "I'll keep Duncan safe," Georgie said. "Come on, Jimmy," Dizzy called. A heartbeat passed and Jimmy followed Dizzy. "What I need you to do is stand a little way off from the house and keep an eye on the front door and the left side of the building as I check it from around to the right." "Yeah, okay, where do I stand?" "Just here will do. If you see anything move, then shout, okay?" "Yeah, okay." The house looked long abandoned, but that didn't mean someone with no desire to care for the house wasn't in there. The front door was closed too, so he knocked. "Anyone home?" There was no answer, so after a few moments he took a walk around the building. There was a window to the left of the front door, but storm shutters had been closed and nailed in place. He walked along the side of the building until he came to another window. 3 of the 4 squares of glass in this sash window were broken, or at least cracked. One shutter from the window was on the ground, while the other was still against the wall, locked in place by a bracket. Looking in, he saw what he took to be a bedroom. There was an old wooden bed frame in there that had fallen apart where it stood. There was no sign of life. A few feet further along was another window, but it was near the roof of the building, and he couldn't see into it. Dizzy figured it to be a bathroom window due to its precision and size. He doubted he could get his head through it even if it wasn't out of reach. Turning around the side of the building, Dizzy saw an overgrown garden that had a dilapidated fence around it, 3 times the size of a house. Despite it being overgrown, he could see someone had spent many hours on it. Everything was squared off and paths were clear between areas of ground which were wilder than where the paths were. Someone had once loved this garden. He walked through the knee-high vegetation to a rear window and looked in. More broken panes of glass and a decomposing curtain which was half closed. It limited his view of the inside, but not by much. This room was a kitchen, complete with open fire, a cauldron and countertops. There was a heavy white sink under the window that was the biggest kitchen sink he'd ever seen. He was pretty sure he could sit in it if he had his legs pulled up to his chest. Next to the back door was a huge pile of firewood and a woodshed. This came out 4 or 5 feet and was as tall and almost as full. The back door wasn't ajar like the front one was. Dizzy tried the handle, but it was locked. He moved on to the other side of the building, but there were no windows along this wall, this side that faced the haze. The others were all where they'd been when he'd left them. "Anything?" "Nothing yet," Jimmy said. "It looks empty from here," Georgie added. "I'm going in. Give a shout if anything happens out here." "You call if anything happens in there." Georgie took a couple of steps forward. Dizzy knocked on the door again, but after a moment of silence he pushed it. The hinges squeaked as the door slowly opened. It smelled damp and everything was covered in a layer of dust and grime. There were a few animal tracks on the ground, but none were recent. There were some footprints from human feet as well, but those were old too. The room he'd walked into was a living room. There was a sofa, a few wall cabinets and a large fireplace. The latter had a cauldron over it, and he could see through to the kitchen. All the furniture was falling apart, with the fabrics threadbare. The single bedroom was as he'd seen through the window, although there was also a chest of drawers that was under the window. Alongside this was a wardrobe. Dizzy opened it and was greeted with empty air. The bathroom had a toilet, basin, and a shower. He turned a single tap on the basin, but nothing happened. The toilet had green water in it. He tried flushing it and was shocked when it drained away and filled up again. He listened as the system filled with water before coming to a stop. All the creature comforts, he mumbled, then jumped as a burst of air came from the tap, followed by brown water that after a few moments started clearing. He wasn't sure he'd want to drink it without boiling it, but at least it was running water. The shower did the same. The kitchen was no different to the rest of the house, run down, but there were signs that it had once been loved. The counters felt solid as he pushed against them, but all were empty. He turned the tap on the sink and had the same result as in the bathroom. There was a hatch in the roof that he imagined led up to a loft, but he wouldn't be able to get into it without a boost. The back door was locked, bolted, and had a bar across it, which was a level of precaution but wasn't represented through the rest of the house. Yes, there were shutters over the windows, but Dizzy thought that was more for the weather than anything else. With the kitchen clear, he went back out to the front of the house where the others were waiting. He stepped out just as the storm clouds were unleashing the first few drops of rain. It's all clear in there, just a loft that needs checking, but I need a bunk up to do that. The old tones of a clap of thunder cracked the air. Let's not wait, Georgie said. They put Duncan on the floor by the fireplace. With a boost from Georgie, Dizzy checked the loft. It was empty aside from a full water tank. It was dark up there, but Dizzy knew what a water tank was when he felt it. Back in the living room, he checked on Duncan. How is he, Jimmy asked. Still out of it, but his vitals seem okay. The wounds in his back don't look as bad. Hopefully he'll come around soon. What happened to him in there? Jimmy said. They both looked around as Georgie broke a piece of bread from over his knee. Full of fire. Oh, there's a woodshed out back that's well loaded with logs. Jimmy, come help. I think we should get as much as we can. I agree. I can get fire going again, no problem. Jimmy said and followed Georgie out the door. Dizzy went and tried the back door but couldn't find any keys for the two locks. There was a flash of lightning, followed a few seconds after by the thunder, and Dizzy went out to help bring him forward. He didn't fancy running out and getting drenched if they had to go back out. As he went round to the back of the house, he shut any of the shutters he could and fixed one that had been on the ground. Well, he got it back in place. Fix might be a strong word for what he did. He wasn't sure how bad this storm was going to get. But the thunder made him jump, and having been born and raised on an orbital, he didn't know what weather could do on a literal level. Films and TV had shown him the sort of power it could have, but he'd never experienced it himself. Clouds that were almost black couldn't be good. As Dizzy and Georgie brought in another load of wood, Jimmy worked on getting it lit. They had matches, but not much they could use to get it to take. Any brush that might be of use outside was too damp, so Jimmy searched the house. He found a pile of rags under a window that he figured had once been a curtain. It was very thin fabric and very dry, but it took when he put a match to it. They'd moved the cauldron, which didn't smell too good, and he'd built a fire where it was. He used some smaller pieces of wood that he'd broken down from the bed and other pieces of furniture. Once it took, it rapidly grew until it had engulfed the logs, and they had heat. You, sir, are star, Dizzy said, as he and Georgie came back in with more logs. That'll see us through the night, won't it? Jimmy looked at the pile next to the fireplace and realised Jimmy had asked that question of him. Yeah, that should do us through the night. His words were punctuated by a clap of thunder. Good, because it is about to heave it down out there. How is Duncan? George asked. Still out of it. He stirred a minute ago. He'll be back with us soon. Let's eat. Jimmy agreed with Georgie. He was exhausted and hungry. He was somewhat calmer now than he had been in quite some time. Aside from what had happened to Duncan, things had been okay to them since they'd landed. The crackle of a fire reminded them of camping trips with his family. It had been quite a few years since they'd gone. Life had got on top of them and they'd forgotten how important it was for them to get away from the city for a couple of weeks. He'd missed camping with his family, and now he'd never be able to go camping with them again. Jimmy realised he hadn't thought much about them since landing. A lot had happened and it had kept his mind occupied. Building the fire had helped. It had made him feel useful and not like a spare part. I'll get the food going, Jimmy said. Dizzy listened to the weather. He was from Jupiter too, an orbital of a gas giant. Weather was somewhat of an alien concept to him. For thunder sounded like explosions going off right next to him, but more primal. Some of them made him feel like his entire skeleton was being personally attacked by it. He had no desire to watch the chaos out there, but Georgie, on the other hand, seemed to enjoy the show immensely. He was sat by the door, which was opened a crack. "What do you reckon? A cube each?" Jimmy said. "Yeah, just 3 for now. We'll do more than Jellington makes up." Jimmy dropped 3 cubes into a pot he found in the kitchen and then added 3 mess tins worth of water into it. They'd been told the cubes could be eaten straight from the packet or they could be cooked in water so they turned into a soup, which was the recommended way. "This isn't what I expected," Diz said. "Aside from that brown hazy shit that Duncan landed in, this place is almost picturesque." "Storm aside," Jimmy said, putting the pot over the fire. "That aside, but you know what I mean. Once that rain stopped, we're going to have that great view again." "It is not what the brochure said," Georgie added with a smile. "Do you think this place is empty because of the brown haze?" Jimmy asked as he stirred the contents of the "Possibly. We must be near some form of civilization, though. I can't see anyone wanting to live so far away from others." "They do. When I used to go camping with my family, this one place we were at, a gorgeous forest near the Treaty Mountain region of the Eisenhower colony. We stumbled across this cabin in the woods near the lake. It was like something out of a movie, you know. All around it was just vegetables, and he had some chickens, pigs, and a couple of goats in pens. He had a boat with fishing rods moored to a dock. This old dude, though, he all but charged out of his cabin with a shotgun in his hands, threatening us about getting too close to his property. We later found out in the local town that he was a total recluse. They saw him maybe once a year, if that. Maybe whoever was here was like that and died. No signs of a body, though. Maybe he went out and something got him." Georgie pointed to Duncan. "Those wounds were not done by a bunny rabbit." "Fucking hope they weren't," Dizzy says. "I think we ought to have a watch overnight. I know it looked like Duncan had crawled out of the haze, and there were no tracks that I could see, but I don't think we should rule that whatever got him could still be out there. All of us being asleep at once isn't a good idea." "I agree. We should talk about what to do next. Do we stay here for a few days and then move on, or do we go tomorrow?" Georgie asked. "I think we ought to wait till Duncan's back with us before deciding. We don't know what shape he'll be in when he comes around, and I don't fancy carrying him till we find the town." "I think we might be safe here," Jimmy added. "It doesn't look like anything bigger than a mouse has been in here for a while." "That haze is unsettling though. It just feels wrong," Dizzy said. "I think we ought to assume we're going to be here for a couple of days, but be ready to move quickly if we have to." "Agreed," Georgie said. "Sounds good," Jimmy said as he poured soup into their separate mess tins. Aside from commenting on how tasty the meal was, they ate in silence as the storm raged outside and the day got darker as the evening swept in.
All right, that was Peter Germany reading a sample chapter from Penal Earth Book 1. The book is available right now. You can click the link in the show notes for that book and more from Peter down there, all of his social medias and website as well. And then, of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out next time when we're back with a new author, a new book, and a brand new sample chapter. Take care, everybody.